bed's on fire. Don't touch me, I'm a real live wire. Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away. Oh.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Terror Obscura, the show where we look at the best and worst horror has to offer. I'm your host, The Fear Fan, and thanks for tuning in. Last time, we took a small detour to Warren Valley, Ohio for Trick or Treat, but this week we're back at Camp Crystal Lake for Friday the 13th, Part 3. On our last trip, we watched Jason travel across America, saw a man romance a dog, and learned that child psychology consists mainly of dressing up like a kid's dead parents and otherwise traumatizing the ever-loving fuck out of them. A good time was had by all, except for the ones who wound up strapped to a hospital gurney, MIA, or with a machete rammed through their shoulder. In the end, Friday the 13th Part 2 was a great sequel. It took everything the original did well, did it better, and managed to introduce a great new villain into the mix at the same time. And, most important to the studio, it made a shit ton of money. So much so, in fact, that the studio not only immediately greenlit another sequel, but once again more than doubled the budget, meaning that we are now dealing with a budget 5 times that of the original. But with all the previous cast members out the door, and with only the director and composer returning, the studio was counting on 2 things to sell Part 3 to the audience. First, brand recognition. You like the first 2, so why not see the third? Second, stereoscopic 3D. That's right, the eye-straining, migraine-inducing clusterfuck that I explored back in Freddy's Dead was still a thing at this point in history. So, what better way to get an audience to sympathize with a character who's getting gouged in the eyes than by forcing them to put on eyewear that makes them feel like they're being gouged in the eyes? Although, on the plus side, it does give us the Friday the 13th Part 3 drinking game. Every time you see a cheesy 3D effect, take a shot. Still, the question remained. Was an increasingly iconic brand name and the possibility of a detached retina enough to get the audience back in the theaters, or would the third time prove to be anything but the charm? There's only one way to know for sure, so let's tune in and find out. We begin, as we did last time, with a recap of the final minutes of the previous movie. Only this time, there's one tiny difference as Jason pulls out the machete that's buried 6 inches deep in his shoulder and wanders off because, let's face it, he wasn't using that clavicle anyway. Now, anybody knows that when you make a sequel, you have to bring something original or different to the franchise in order to make it stand out. And luckily for us, Part 3 does bring something new to the table. The funk. Anyway, now that we've gotten that out of our systems, time for the story. We open on a stormy night at a small grocery store near Crystal Lake, where the owners have oddly enough decided to hang their laundry outside to dry. Either that, or clotheslines plus rainstorm equals redneck washing machine. Either way, it doesn't take long for Harold, the owner of the establishment, to show up and give us a taste of the glorious 3D technology on display here.
God damn it, Harold! I spent all day yesterday washing your clothes. Look what you're doing to them. You know I work very hard around here trying to keep up with you.
Money well spent. And something tells me I'm going to need a bigger bottle. Of course, Harold and his wife's quiet evening alone is short-lived, since after a rather conspicuous 3D antenna adjustment, take a shot, we see that Jason has decided to help himself to some new duds. Although, who can blame him, since it appears that he's not the only one taking advantage of the store's stock.
They fly eggs.
After stuffing his face and probably wondering whether or not he should eat that bunny, Harold makes his way out to the shed where he encounters a crappy 3D snake designed to make the audience A, take yet another shot, and B, crap their pants. Although let's face it, only an idiot would be that afraid of a fake snake. Case in point. Although they do manage to get some nice product placement in there, don't know about the rest of you, but I could definitely go for a Coke right now. Of course, it seems that Harold has dropped his last deuce, and it's not too long before he winds up on the receiving end of a cleavergram. He died the way he lived, forgetting to wipe. Not wanting to be left out of the fun, it's not long before Ethel feels like she's missing out and decides to take in some stupid 3D Petrix as well. At least until Jason decides to take up needlepoint inside of her skull. So while the two of them head off to that great big grocery store in the sky, we cut to the next day, actually Saturday the 14th now that I think about it, where we're only one game of 3D baseball away from meeting our new crop of victims. Meet Chris, Andy, and his girlfriend Debbie. I do my usual thing and crack jokes about their various personality traits at this point, except that they don't really have any. Lucky for the audience, they do have a special guest to liven things up.
Didn't mean it that way.
Look, you guys, I want you to have a good time this weekend. What happened to me at the lake happened a long time ago. I'm fine, really, okay? Just forget about me.
Oh, I'm supposed to forget that we've been friends.
Yeah, I hate to tell you this, but auditions for Alice Sweet Alice are that way. Meet Shelley, resident horror and special effects enthusiast, and example of what happens if you feed Jonah Hill after midnight. He and his friends, along with his blind date Vera, are headed to Crystal Lake for a weekend of fun. To facilitate this, they've also brought along a couple of filthy hippies because, hey, why not? That said, it quickly becomes apparent exactly what these two bring to the table.
Let's share the wealth with those less fortunate up front here, huh?
No thanks, I'll just stick with this. Of course, after watching them turn the van into a hotbox and do pot in entirely the wrong way, we learn that there's some pretty fast job turnover in Crystal Lake, as it seems Crazy Ralph's position of terror hobo has already been filled.
I found this today. There were other parts of the body.
That's an eyeball!
But he said he wanted me to have this. Go back from whence ye came. I have warned thee. I have warned thee.
Okay, not bad, but you forgot to tell them that they were all doomed. Doomed! And points off for failing to hide in a closet for no reason, and your lack of a little blue bicycle. I have worked with Crazy Ralph before, and you, sir, are no Crazy Ralph. Surprise, surprise, having a fake eye shoved in their face isn't enough to put a damper on their weekend, and they soon arrive at Higgins Haven, their own little corner of Crystal Lake. There, we get to meet Rick, horn dog extraordinaire, Chris's love interest, and quite possibly the world's oldest 20-something. I know these movies tend to hire older actors to play teenagers, but could we please try to keep it this side of 40? And if you think these characters are supposed to be the same age as their actors, more on that later.
Rick?
My imagination, or did it just get cold in here? Did I do something wrong?
Yeah, why would she be mad? I always greet people by leaping at them, grabbing them by the neck, then trying to force my tongue down their throat. Gets a little bit awkward when the pizza guy shows up, but hey, you can't be rude. Of course, it's not entirely his fault, since I'm pretty sure Chris has the worst peripheral vision of anyone I've ever seen.
Wasn't this store closed a few minutes ago?
It's my bag. I'll take care of it.
Shelley, what are you doing in there? Why aren't you down at the lake with everybody else?
Oh, they said they were going skinny dipping, and I'm not skinny enough.
On one hand, I'm tempted to say that wasn't frightening because of the lame jump scare, but on the other hand, the thought of Shelley skinny dipping in 3D is going to give me nightmares for weeks. And as much as I appreciate they're trying to create characters I actually give a crap about, frankly, some of them are starting to overstay their welcome. Seriously, is it too much to ask that they kill someone already? Shelley? Oh, thank God. I mean, oh my God. Of course, it turns out that the whole thing is just a practical joke, which manages to piss off his companions. Although, whether that's because he scared them or because they're disappointed he didn't take a hatchet to the face is up for debate. Whatever the case, they decide that the best way to handle it is for Shelley to go walkies to get it out of his system. And who better for the task than his date, who decides to take him to a convenience store that has some strangely familiar ambient music.
Shelley! I need some money.
Excuse me, but I believe that's my wallet.
Make a wish.
Is this your rubber?
Well, A, I wish you'd actually do it, and B, I I'm pretty sure she has girl parts. Also, does it seem weird to anyone else that the convenience store soundtrack has the ki ma 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 that supposedly exists only in Jason's subconscious? Anyway, meet Fox, Ali, and Loco, general douchebags, and sole members of the world's smallest motorcycle gang. Still, despite the fact that they're more sons of mild disarray than sons of anarchy, they're still pretty intimidating to the random geeks they assault at Quick Trip. Although that can backfire sometimes.
Uh-oh.
See? Told you. You know, you could probably avoid situations like this if you just smiled every once in a while. You see? Now is that so hard? Good effort, but it still needs work. And as it turns out, that was exactly the wrong thing to do, since Shelly decides to go Mad Max on his ass. Having hulked the fuck out, Shelly turns tail and heads back to the cabin. And there we witness one of the defining moments of the franchise and cinema itself, the yo-yo sequence.
Hey, what do you say we go get some exercise?
This is all the exercise I need.
Woo! That was a lot to do at once, but thank God that's over.
That was close. Hey, you better watch out with that thing. I'm warning you, Andy. I'll break your string.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in just a few minutes.
And we're back. Thanks for waiting a few minutes while I straighten myself out.
Dude, put away the Robitussin.
Moving on. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, this does mean I'm discontinuing the drinking game, since I'm pretty sure I'll need a liver transplant by the time we reach Act 3. Anyway, having demonstrated why they needed all that extra money for 3D effects, the gang's shocked to discover what happened to Rick's car. Rick himself, fed up with these whippersnappers with their motorcycle gangs and backsass, needs a break and decides to head out with Chris for some fresh air. Or maybe he just wants to get away from that darn camera crew that's following them around. And since we're quite literally taking a look at the production side of things, here's a fun fact. Although the film's set during the summer, it was actually quite chilly out when they were shooting. They did their best to disguise the fact, but there are still hints here and there throughout the movie. See if you can spot two in this scene. Yup. And despite that it's, a bit nippy out, that's apparently not enough to stop the Hex Angels from trying to exact a bit of revenge. Planning to siphon their gas and burn down the barn, while smoking no less, the Three Stooges Bike Club proves that they forgot their Adderall today as Fox wanders off to dick around in the barn that they're planning to burn down in the next few minutes. And I would worry about them burning down the barn, but something tells me that these three are more a danger to themselves than anybody else.
Shit.
Great. Now I can't shake the feeling that these people have to wear special helmets even when they're not on their motorcycles. And they prove me right shortly thereafter when Loco spots a miraculously non-perforated Fox and follows her into the barn of death. There, he proves to have peripheral vision on a par with Chris's by somehow managing to stumble across a gruesome sight that was literally in front of him 3 seconds before. You know, part of me wants to blame Jason, but the other part wonders if she really is that freaking clumsy. Still, never one to let a good idea go to waste, Jason proves that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery and renders Loco extremely muerte. And as if to prove that these people really are the horror movie equivalent of lemmings, Ali is hot on their heels. And while this may be a Friday the 13th movie, something about it is starting to remind me of the light grenade scene from Mom and Dad Save the World.
He has a light grenade! Careful, men. There's a light grenade on the ground. Where? Show us. Where? Right here!
Pick me up.
Hell, Jason literally has to throw a corpse at this guy to tip him off, and even then, his only reaction is to try and pick a fight with the maniac that just took out 2 of his friends before they could even scream. Needless to say, he immediately gets bitch slapped, and Jason goes to town on his right arm with a meat cleaver since murder is hard, I guess. Regardless, he manages to finish just in time to see that while Andy may not have much in the personality department, he's at least trying to come up with some way of making himself memorable.
What are you doing?
Show off. Also, it's probably worth noting that before they wander off, they too nearly succumb to the siren song of the Death Barn, because it's apparently a black hole whose event horizon no character can escape. Seriously, at this point, I'm not sure if I should be more afraid of Jason or the fucking barn. So, several hours later, Chris and Rick finally reach their destination. And while I normally wonder why it took so long to get there, my experience with drivers Rick's age leads me to believe that he was doing 10 under the speed limit with his left turn signal on the whole time. No doubt bored out of their skulls waiting for them to get back, and he's apparently had time to increase his repertoire of stupid protagonist tricks and drag Shelley along with him. Deciding some TNA will help break up the monotony, Debbie leads Andy off, and Shelley decides that he's tired of playing with his own balls.
Vera, you and I have gotten to know each other a little today, you know, and I like you. I like you a lot. I was thinking that maybe, you know, we could...
I don't think so.
Well, nice try, Shelley, but at least you were able to accept it with some quiet dignity and grace.
Sure. We'll talk. Bitch.
Quiet dignity and grace.
Well, that didn't last. Although, judging by the soundtrack, neither will he. Either Jason's close by, or that convenience store from earlier is stalking him. Murderous masonry notwithstanding, we cut back to Chris and Rick, where we finally learn why she's been away from the lake for the last 2 years.
I don't know if you remember, but when you dropped me off that night, it was very late. I knew my parents would be waiting for me, but I didn't care. We had such a good time. The minute I walked in the door, my parents started yelling at me and cursing me.
Well, I can't say that I blame your dad, since your date was old enough to be your dad. And for those of you who still think I'm exaggerating their age difference, let me point out that this is the sort of argument that only teenagers have, and this took place 2 years ago. That means Chris can't be older than 21. And if this is the face of a man in his early 20s, then I'm a fucking zygote. And it's here that we reach one of the most controversial parts of the movie, as we learn that after the argument, Chris ran off into the woods to scare her parents, and wound up getting attacked by Jason, and, well, as the movie puts it...
I was kicking and screaming and yelling, but it didn't do any good. He dragged me along the ground. I blacked out. I don't know what happened after that. I just don't know.
Alright, putting aside the comedy for a second, let's answer the big question. Did Jason rape Chris? I've seen people come down on either side of the issue over the years, so here's my take. While some people argue that Jason let her go because this flashback takes place before he was a killer, the 2-year timeline doesn't really match up with that. And while I've also heard that some people consider this a precognitive dream, that doesn't really explain how she remembers everything from the time she got home to the time she was assaulted, but doesn't remember actually getting into her own bed and falling asleep. Also, if it was just a dream, I'm pretty sure that wouldn't be enough to keep someone away from a place that was obviously a big part of their life for 2 years. On top of that, you have to take into account that the Jason we all know and love hasn't been formed by the rest of the series yet, and that the writers at this time may have had different ideas about who and what Jason was. Plus, there are other scenes in the movie like this one.
Sex, sex, sex. You guys are getting boring, you know that?
What would a weekend in the country be without sex?
Cool it, Andy.
Didn't mean it that way.
Look, you guys. I want you to have a good time this weekend. What happened to me at the lake happened a long time ago.
And the fact that she seems to be having some physical intimacy issues with Rick tends to make me a bit suspicious. In summary, while it's not 100% definitive, it's certainly heavily implied, and regardless of what actually happened, it's what Chris seems to think happened, so the effects on her character are the same. Whew, glad I got that out of the way. Now back to the comedy.
What's that?
It's a Volkswagen! So, as Chris and Rick make their way back to the cabin on foot, we see that the rest of the gang are partaking in the traditional pastimes of doomed slasher fodder the world over.
heavy shit.
Alright, petty theft, sexual assault, and now trying to tip over an occupied outhouse. Are we sure Jason's a serial killer and not just some douchebag frat bro? And although Jason may not be up to doing away with our characters, there is something else lurking nearby that can. Constructed by the evil Amish on an Indian burial ground and used as an asylum for retired Satanists, it waits. It is the Death Barn. And death awaits all who enter. You got lucky this time. Although speaking of people who aren't getting lucky tonight, let's see how Shelly's doing.
Damn it, Shelley! Why do you do these stupid things?
I have to.
No, you don't have to.
No, he's not kidding. He really does have to. The screenwriters wrote him as an idiot. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, that is the first appearance of the series' iconic hockey mask. Although, I've got to wonder, how exactly did he fit a hockey mask, hatchet, prosthetics, wetsuit, and a damn spear gun into that little box he brought with him? Seriously, what is that thing, the damn TARDIS? Shelley's magic bag of holding aside, he soon finds himself drawn like a moth to a flame as he enters the Barn of No Return. Go, Death Barn, kill! Oh well, you get an A for effort. Of course, the barn apparently finishes Shelley off-screen, since the next time we see his mask, gets wrapped around the mug of a 7-foot-tall serial killer, where it belongs. And here we have it, folks, the very first kill from the fully masked Jason we all grew up with. How does it stack up?
Hey, now cut that out right now. That's not funny.
Not bad. Bonus points for visually demonstrating what wearing stereoscopic 3D glasses feels like. Anyway, now equipped to either become a horror icon or for a career in the NHL, Jason sets out to do what he does best. Cock-blocking horny teenagers as they enjoy some gymnastics in the bedroom.
Do you want a beer or not?
And out of the bedroom too, apparently. And I'm apparently not the only one who despises showboating, because Jason shows up to chop his ego down to size. Great, now he can do the splits. Putting up with him before was hard, but now it's gonna be impossible. So while Andy is trying out for the post-mortem Olympics, Debbie decides to grab a magazine and wait for her own demise. Although, I've gotta admit, I do dig her choice of reading material. Damn, this magazine has better 3D effects than the movie. Although, I've gotta admit, they might be a bit too good. Yeah, she probably should have steered clear of that article on the new Friday the 13th movie that's coming out. Anyway, after more wacky 3D hijinks, we learned that they probably should have used that portion of the budget to pay the power bill as the lights go out. Since we're running low on cast members that actually matter, it's up to Captain Hippie, aka Chuck, to save the day. Luckily, he doesn't have to go it alone, as Jason's on hand to play amateur electrician. Huh, I'm not sure what I'm more impressed by. The fact that hippies are apparently extremely electrically conductive, or that Jason actually managed to fix the lights. Either way, Chili, for such is the name of the bride of Hippie Man, is in for a shock when the cretin from the Black Lagoon shows up to annoy us one final time.
Nice makeup job. Stop fooling around, man.
And I can't really blame her for thinking that he's faking it, since it's been almost 10 minutes since he's had his throat cut. Although, now that I think about it, the idea that Chili's brain can function for 10 minutes without oxygen explains a lot about his character. Of course, once Chili realizes she has a mess to clean up, all bets are off, and although she almost gets away, she's defeated by two things. First, the fact that doors and windows on Crystal Lake just pop open by themselves, and second, just like everyone else in this movie, she appears to lack any and all peripheral vision. Seriously, you looked right at him twice! Either that or you were more afraid of the door than the psychotic killer wielding a red-hot poker. So while Jason discovers how to cook chili on a stick, Chris and Rick finally make it back to camp. And it's about time too. So, what will the final confrontation be like? A tense game of cat and mouse like in part 1? Will they try to turn the tables using psychology like in part 2? A big knockdown, drag-out brawl? I've got to say, I made a few cracks about Rick's advanced age, but he's a pretty big guy. He should be able to handle himself. Damn it, and he was this close to getting Social Security. Of course, Chris isn't having an easy time of it either, and after discovering that Jason apparently likes to do his victim's laundry, and that he's inherited his mom's taste for murder arts and crafts, she tries to barricade herself in, only to discover just how right Chili was to be afraid of those damn doors. Yeah, I hate to tell you this, Chris, but given that Rick spent the entire film A, hitting on a rape victim, and B, being completely useless, I'm pretty sure he would have found a way to fuck this up. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Rick, the most useless man in the universe. Although he does get some bonus boyfriend points for coming when she called. So, with nothing standing between her and the homicidal maniac, it's time for Chris to take matters into her own hands. And I've got to admit, she's not half bad. After demonstrating that knowledge is power, she grabs a knife out of the nearest body and goes to town. Although, I've got to admit, her technique could use a bit of work. Oh, come on, you missed like a dozen times. Could somebody please show her how it's done? Still a miss, but points for style. So, after finding the one window in the place that doesn't pop open on its own, she's forced to smash her way out with a chair since Rick isn't on hand to toss through it. And I've got to hand it to her, she does fight smart, even setting up a decent ambush for him before trying to haul ass out of there in the van. That said, Jason's no slouch in the brains department either. Now, a lot of people think of Jason as a dumb, unthinking brute that only uses violence to solve his problems, but in truth, he's not above using his head to catch his prey. See? Problem solved! With our two opponents clearly so evenly matched, there's really only one place to resolve this, the Barn of Death. After a quick Spider-Man impression allows her to literally get the drop on Jason, she lures him to the second floor, cold cocks his ass, and hangs him like the world's most terrifying piñata. After all that hard work, it's finally time to take a look at the man behind the mask. Yes, you! Who looks nothing like you did the last time we saw you, since you're now considerably more deformed, and have somehow managed to shave since you had a machete buried in your arm last night. But still, you! And apparently he's still up for more fun and games, and looks like he's going to actually come out on top until help arrives from an unexpected direction. Wait a second, didn't he cut your hand off with a cleaver earlier? Better. So while Jason strives to not only correct a continuity error, but also to take out the only other person who's apparently as unkillable as he is, Chris grabs an axe and finally puts an end to things. Aw, he just wanted a hug! Either that, or he's trying to cop a feel. Regardless, that seems to have finally done the trick, as Jason drops for good. Taking a clue from Alice, Chris grabs a boat and shoves it out on the water for a peaceful night on the lake, because that worked out so well last time. And I'm not kidding. Seriously, I think the lake itself just likes sending cheap jump scares at people. Really? A log and a duck? That's the best you've got? Not bad, but you still haven't brought your A game like you did at the end of part 1 or 2. What you really need is a nice solid jump scare Okay, that was a good one. I'll even take back all those jokes I made about zombie Betsy Palmer during part 2. Of course, it turns out that all of that is just a dream, and Chris is now completely nucking Futz. As she's led away by the men with the butterfly nets, we see that the Death Barn has claimed its final victim, and take one final look at the deceptively placid surface of Crystal Lake before ending on a tone of mystery and tension. Or the tone of a shitty 80s roller disco, take your pick. Anyway, that's Friday the 13th Part 3, and while it wasn't quite as good as Part 2, it's still a very, very solid fright flick. As I said back when I was reviewing the Nightmare on Elm Street series, one of the fun things about going through an entire franchise from start to finish is seeing how the villain evolves. So far, in the space of 3 films, we've seen Jason go from a throwaway jump scare to the main villain, and watched his look evolve from a messed up kid to a killer hillbilly in a potato sack to the hockey mask ensemble we all know and love. And what an iconic look it is. There are several reasons why Jason's mask works as well as it does, and the first is that it accentuates our fear of the unknown. Sure, it hides his face, but we can see from his misshapen skull and the malformed twist of his body that there's something very, very wrong with him. That said, the mask hides whatever might be lurking under there, so the audience is left to dread whatever's being kept hidden. Second, while Freddy's scars are a reflection of who and what he is on the inside, the cold blank stare of Jason's mask, and the fact that it looks like a distorted parody of a human face, make it a perfect reflection of the man inside. And speaking of the mask, there are a lot of stories going around about who picked the mask and why, but the one that makes the most sense to me is this. When they were shooting the scene where Shelley springs from the water, they needed to do a lighting check. Since the mask they were going to use in the scene wasn't on hand, one of their crew lent them his white hockey mask from his gym bag so they could get a proper light reading. Basically, they liked the look so much, they decided to keep it, and an icon was born. And while it's the film that gave us the look that Jason's kept for 30 years now, Part 3 also does a lot of other things right. The acting's decent, Steve Miner's directing is, as always, spot on, and despite the layers of cheesy 3D effects, the gore and kills are all great. In fact, Andy's death is one of my favorites in the entire series, not just for the gruesome concept and the amazing way in which it was executed, but also for the fact that the aftermath is also probably one of the most shuddersome visuals in the entire franchise. Still, it's not all sunshine, roses, and hideously mangled morons, as the movie suffers from the major failing of most of the films in the franchise. I'm speaking, of course, of the plot. As with the previous 2 movies, the only way they can keep the main character from packing their shit and leaving is by keeping them in the dark about the killer's presence. As a result, we're treated to an entire film of our survivor girl doing exactly nothing until it's time for the climax. Since they never really face any adversity, it's kind of hard for the audience to form an attachment to them, or for them to form a distinct personality, meaning that we're left with another case of survival of the blandest. Despite that, Part 3 delivered exactly what the audience asked for, and provided Paramount with another slam dunk at the box office. While this film was originally meant to be the end of the series, that fact alone meant that it wouldn't be very long before this franchise, like Jason himself, was to rise from the grave. But that's a story for another day. Tune in next time as I fulfill another fan's request for a completely different kind of sequel. Till then, this is the Fear Fan, signing off.
Coming this Christmas to a theater near you, the most horrifying film to hit the screen. There's a homicidal maniac who finds a Cub Scout troop, and he hacks up 2 or 3 in every scene. Please don't reveal the secret ending to your friends. Don't spoil the big surprise.